When the photos are in, we'll put them online and blow this whole thing wide open on the web.
Don't you think that the authorities will just shut us down?
Probably, but it won't matter. There'll be mirror sites spawning within minutes after those images go up. We won't even have to ask. People will be grabbing the pictures. There's no way anyone can stop it. Information has a life of its own, and as long as it lasts, it'll keep existing, even if it has to change its form or location.
Life?
Yeah, the desire of people to learn, the demand for data.
That's called idle curiosity in my book.
And this is what they plan to do right over Manhattan.
The New York Stock Exchange.
Will suffer the same fate.
If one of the key movers of world economy stops functioning, it could mean the beginning of a global depression. Black Monday will look like a picnic in comparison.
I wanted power. They sought destruction. Picture a massive political vacuum. A space that every powermonger will try to fill for their own greedy ends. I'm talking about an unregulated power struggle. Panic, civil war, chaos. When I told Solidus that I wished to prevent disaster, he replied that pawns can never become players.
Snake, do you remember the sinking of that tanker 2 years ago?
Of course.
Terrorists blow a hole in an oil tanker full of crude barely 20 miles off the shore of Manhattan. Your classic nightmare. It didn't take long for the government to put an oil fence around the whole mess. And then that massive offshore cleanup facility went up inside. Big shower.
It is amazing. Dr. Emmerich's father participated in the Manhattan Project? That was the secret World War II project responsible for the creation of the first atomic bomb.
climbs over the wall, they'll blow him off. If he tries to fly over the river, they'll shoot him down. If he comes back alone, they'll explode his brain. New York, 1997. One man has 24 hours to break in and break out before it's too late for escape.
At long last, it seems that she will go through the immigration process. Will Lady Liberty finally get her green card?
It's a video game series called Metal Gear Solid. It was rumored that there's a character in the game that's inspired by Snake Plissken, and they actually do the voiceover.
Well,
This is Karen Hojo reporting from Ellis Island. The effects of last night's incident are apparent even here. The Statue of Liberty made the long trip from France to Liberty Island in 1886 as a birthday present, if you will, on the centennial of our independence. She now stands in front of the Immigration Museum.
Welcome. I'm the High Priestess, and I'm here to show you how to look within yourself for the answers you seek.
ooh, thank you. That's a very nice curtain. What's behind it?
Never mind. Now shut up and listen.
For 10 centuries it has waited to be awakened, to be worshipped again like a god, to fill the skies. Today in New York City, the winged serpent rules. The legend has come alive.
Because of the phallic shape of the snake as well as its ability to reproduce abundantly, snakes also became symbols of fertility and plenty.
They got my eye!
Iroquois is a Frankified version of the Algonquin word for rattlesnakes. It's what they called their enemies.
Algonquin?
The Algonquin Nation, one of the many groups of Native Americans who used to call Manhattan Island their home. The majority of tribes, in what's now the state of New York, were a part of the Algonquin Nation.
So this was a stronghold of snakes.
By the way, Manhattan means Island of Hills in Algonquin.
After struggling through a 10-year recession, Japan now finds itself at the forefront of a new age in internet technology. Kota Osahi writes for a magazine aimed at young people. He has witnessed a change in recent months in the country's attitude to developments such as playing games and surfing the net. A social revolution is taking place, led by the mobile phone.
From now on, with the development of mobile technology, I think people will become more split from one another. People will be less in touch, communicating with their phones, not their mouths.
So during the early hours of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, all systems were operational as expected. Providers like AOL and Verizon typically scheduled routine maintenance at this time, since it was when they had the least amount of activity. But when American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, user traffic, driven by people trying to learn the absolute latest information, increased by orders of magnitude within just a few minutes. And these servers just couldn't handle it. Much of the internet simply stopped working. One user reported being at school trying to log on to CNN and Yahoo.com to get more information, and they just couldn't. It was an event where the Earth stood still.
Russia.
Fluids.
And it was very much on everyone's mind as to how the public would react to this so soon after.
They also had to change a line in the film, which was when the pilot, Slim Pickens, is going through the content survival check, and he's saying, you know, prophylactics, lipstick, nylon stockings. Then he says, hell, a fella could have a pretty good time in Dallas with all that stuff. And of course, you look at his, he had to loop in, and the line now is Vegas.
Shoot, a fella could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with all that stuff.
The impact of President Kennedy's assassination pushes the film's general release to late January in 1964.
Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, a distinguished career military officer, an historian, an author, an expert on the international railroad industry. Some of you may be familiar with Colonel Prouty from his 1970s book, The Secret Team, which has now recently been republished and is once again available. And of course, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people in the United States and around the world are familiar with Colonel Prouty as the real live character upon whom the figure of Mr. X in the recent Oliver Stone movie JFK was based.
Because, after all, the big shell is the farthest thing from a cleanup plant there is.
What?
Nothing in this affair is what it seems.
I, in my stories and novels, often write about counterfeit worlds, semi-real worlds, as well as deranged private worlds, inhabited often by just one person, while meantime the other characters either remain in their own worlds throughout, or are somehow drawn into one of the peculiar ones. I cite The Man in the High Castle and my 1974 novel about the U.S. as a police state, called Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. I'm going to be very candid with you. I wrote both novels based on fragmentary residual memories of such a horrid slave state world. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Bullshit.
What's bullshit, Mr. Quaid? That you're having a paranoid episode triggered by acute neurochemical trauma? Or that you're really an invincible secret agent from Mars who's the victim of an interplanetary conspiracy to make him think he's a lowly construction worker? Swallow this.
What is it?
It's a symbol of your desire to return to reality. Inside your dream, you'll fall asleep.
Jack, how far do you think the Patriots' digital control extends?
I don't really know, but it probably influences a lot of what goes on in our everyday lives.
Even mundane things like which movies and songs become a hit and what kind of clothes we wear?
I think taste would be the easiest thing to manipulate. I mean, think about the kinds of film and bands everyone wants to go to see. It's whatever's at the top of the charts.
And if the charts are made up...
Exactly.
But you can't really control individual taste. It's too closely tied to personality.
I don't know about that. Trends have always been about following the leader.
Not necessarily.
The age of direct personal interaction is over. So is the idea of word-of-mouth communication. Rose, you have any friends you've met online?
Yeah, I do.
How many?
Well, if you count only the ones I talk to a lot, I'd say about 20.
How many of those have you actually met?
1 or 2 tops.
Uh-huh. That's how it is for everyone, I guess. And even if your online buddies had fake identities and were circulating false information, you'd have no way of knowing.
Fake identities?
Right. And there'd be no way for you to know for sure.
Well, what about people who do meet face-to-face then? Like us.
Us?
Have you ever really shown me the real you?
I wouldn't even know the real me myself.
The business of protecting American soil was forever changed by 9/11. Defense spending more than doubled in the decade after the attacks. This benefited both private and public companies. The number of American defense contractors almost tripled. These new companies were tasked with a new challenge, being able to identify and track small terrorist groups or even individual people of interest. That led to investment in new technology, like drones, for surveillance and to gather information. But in the US, data collection became a source of controversy. The Patriot Act, passed in October 2001, allowed government agencies to collect information about American citizens in order to compile watch lists and no-fly lists. Intelligence agencies were also given the authority to access communication records and wiretap phones without a warrant. Much of this has been scaled back, but the idea of prioritizing security over privacy remains.
What is the Pentagon trying to do? Colonel, answer me.
The Secretary of Defense has taken over active control of this operation. He's on his way there by AWACS.
I'm Hal, Dave.
Oh, that's right. Hal. Hal and Dave. That's a good one. Maybe we should take a trip to Jupiter.
Are you familiar with the film 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I've heard of it, but...
Of course not. I didn't expect you to be cultured enough to appreciate such things.
Yeah, thanks. Anyway...
2001 features an AI called HAL, a highly advanced system that controls an exploration spacecraft. It can converse with people and even play chess.
Huh. Now, where have I heard that before?
The way HAL was portrayed was truly superb.
How so?
HAL is given secret orders that not even the ship's captain knows about. Naturally, he's not allowed to divulge them to the crew. The stress of it causes HAL to crack.
Crack?
Go crazy. Though there are those who interpret it differently. One by one, HAL kills off the crew until the captain finally shuts it down. The film offers amazing insights into AI, their growth, their utility, their faults, and their fear of death. It was full of hints about the future of human evolution. Truly, a film for the ages.
It has been 2 years since the Shadow Moses Island incident. New York was suffering unmatched environmental destruction. A tanker has sunk in Manhattan Bay, and tons of petroleum have poured into and covered the entire bay. A huge water purification plant called Big Blue Apple was built in Manhattan Bay to clean up the mess. However, even a year after the accident, there was very little progress in the cleanup process. The polluted ocean area is still being closed. The Navy Special Forces Unit, Dead Cell, occupies this ocean plant. The name of the person leading these men calling themselves Sons of Liberty is Solid Snake, the hero of Shadow Moses Island. Ironically, the occupation took place on April 30th, the day Washington declared independence in New York. If this plant were to be exploded, all of Manhattan Bay will burn up in flames. New York will suffer devastating damages. Moreover, the US president was visiting the plant on that very day. Protect the president, prevent the explosion of the plant, and get rid of the terrorists. This secret order is given to Foxhound's new member with the codename Raiden. Raiden goes into the plant alone.
Caught on camera right near the Statue of Liberty. It was a ferry was passing by.
There are multitudes of meditations and rituals that involve working with the Tree of Life. Some of these rituals follow specific patterns, paths from one area of the tree to another. One of my favorite patterns to meditate on is the flaming sword, or the lightning flash.
Now, in terms of the Rider-Waite card, we can see a connection between the lightning flash and the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, which we spoke about in the High Priestess episode.
This can be exploring deep trauma or long-buried experiences in therapy. This can be a blow to your ego or blow to your professional or work identity, devastation, or finally escaping from a prison. This can represent corruption being exposed, earth-shaking change, a bone-rattling truth coming to light. This can lead to tremendous growth. The flash of enlightenment, revelation, the lightning bolt of inspiration.
Remember the day we met?
I'm kind of busy right now, Rose.
You're right, sorry.
I do remember. It was right after I transferred to New York. There were all these tourists around you in front of the Federal Hall.
A group of middle-aged Japanese ladies came up and asked me which building it was that King Kong was climbing in the movie. I said it was probably the Chrysler Building, and then you showed up and started mouthing off. You were like, no, it's the Empire State.
I said the Chrysler Building was in Godzilla.
We started arguing, and I forgot all about the tourists. I was insisting that I was right, and you were doing the same. The next thing we knew, the Japanese women had gone away, and we ended up going to the Skyscraper Museum to see who had the better recall.
We argued all the way to Battery Park.
And for nothing.
Since the museum was closed. We went our separate ways from the museum. And then I found you again by coincidence out in the base corridor.
An amazing coincidence that we were actually working at the same place.
That night we went up to the top of the Empire State.
It was so beautiful. I could look down on the Chrysler Building from 120 stories above ground.
I felt overwhelmed. I didn't care anymore who was right.
And that was our first date.
We watched King Kong in your apartment a bunch of times that night. Didn't sleep till morning. If it weren't for that coincidence, we wouldn't be together.
I know. I'm sorry, Jack. I'm taking up your time again.
What?
Take care.
And Snake and Raiden, this is the weirdest part. Snake and Raiden were meant to imitate Godzilla and King Kong because Snake is kind of like man-made, and so he just kind of exists to protect humanity from Metal Gear. And then Raiden was meant to imitate King Kong because he got lured to the city by a woman and was fighting on top of a skyscraper.
What? I didn't know that one.
Kojima, man.
Snake, have you ever seen The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms?
Nope.
It's about this monster that comes to life from deep within a glacier as a result of an H-bomb test in the Arctic. It crosses the ocean and emerges in New York. I especially like the scene where the monster attacks the lighthouse, and the one where it pops out of a valley in Manhattan and makes a big hole in a building. And the last scene on the burning roller coaster was simply incredible. And because I saw it in a drive-in theater, I actually felt like I was part of the movie. It's funny, isn't it? How you can let yourself get absorbed into these things without thinking even when you know it's not real?
Distinguishing between what's real and what's not isn't always as simple as we think.
「冗談なんですけど、前回がデイブとハルで、2001年宇宙の旅だったんで、今回は、冒頭タンカーなんで、タンカーといえば当時はタイタニックが流行った後だったんで、ジャックとローズ。
Jack, do you remember what day tomorrow is?
What is it, Rose? Talk to me.
It's 6/16, September 11th, 2001. See you later.
While filming the Titanic for his documentary Ghosts of the Abyss, director James Cameron was oblivious to what was happening above water. James was 12,500 feet deep, attempting to give viewers never-before-seen glimpses of what remained of the RMS Titanic, while the rest of the world watched another disaster. Once his submarine surfaced, the late actor Bill Paxton delivered him the harsh news.
What's this thing that's going on?
Worst terrorist attack in history, Jim.
We all were very wrapped up in what we were doing, and we all thought it was desperately important.
By two separate hijacked commercial jets.
And then this horrible event happened and slammed us into this perspective.
The State of the World. A single MO disc revived the threat of nuclear weapons. The MO disc containing Metal Gear Rex exercise data recovered by Ocelot has circulated around the world, resulting in every nuclear-equipped country developing its own Metal Gear, which would fire stealth nuclear warheads from its railgun. Metal Gear's base technology has spread not only to the other of the Big Five nuclear states, but to countries such as Iraq and North Korea as well. The main reason behind the time limit and Metal Gear Solid Start 3 has still not been signed in light of the revelation of the Shadow Moses incident. Tensions with Russia are rising over the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty and its effect on national missile defense development, with Russia now no longer able to economically support a large nuclear arsenal. In truth, the exercise that took place on Shadow Moses was a failure, and the technology to launch a stealth warhead by railgun still incomplete. Ocelot and Solidus covered up this fact in the MO disk data, purposely leaking false data to the countries of the world in order to bring back worldwide nuclear deterrence. The leaking of the Shadow Moses incident was also done on purpose, which is why Nastasha's book was allowed to be published. Everything was done for the purpose of advancing the Arsenal Metal Gear project. Solidus leaked the disk data with the knowledge that countries like Iraq and North Korea will never complete a Metal Gear. A rogue state, Iraq or North Korea, is suspected of developing a Metal Gear. US airstrikes are imminent. Suspicions arise that Iraq or North Korea is developing its own Metal Gear, though it probably does not have the technology to fully complete it. In light of this, the United Nations Special Commission, UNSCON, decides to conduct nuclear inspections inside the country, having presented documents it has uncovered related to the country's Metal Gear development. However, Iraq refuses UNSCON's demand, with the US deciding to use military airstrikes in response. In an attempt to prevent the airstrikes, Iraq takes the 100-member inspection team hostage. They had already moved into the country unannounced beforehand with the intention of conducting surprise weapons inspections. The hostages are comprised of 80 members of UNSCON, as well as 10 VIPs from the International Atomic Energy Agency. The US, undeterred by this, planned to go ahead with the airstrikes, thus starting a second Gulf War. It is under this tense state of affairs that the plan chapter begins. The irony sets in that no matter the time, the world continues to behave the same way. The inspector's demands are the handover of all documentation on Metal Gear, the implementation of camera surveillance of the country's weapons facilities, the questioning of certain officials and employees, the inspections of facilities with the capability of developing a Metal Gear, and the abandonment of all Metal Gear development. With the death of the president at the beginning of the plan chapter, the green light for the airstrikes is delayed and the chain of command thrown into disarray, though his death is actually a ruse. At the end of the game, the Iraqi government agrees to UNSCON's demands and the crisis is diverted.
Policy guru who sat in, listened in, who stalked Prime Minister and President at every turn. A man who today revealed that Saddam's name first cropped up in a transatlantic phone call just days after the 9/11 attacks.
The first time that the President mentioned Iraq to the Prime Minister after 9/11 was on the 14th of September in a telephone call. And he said, if I recall, that he thought there might be evidence that there was some connection between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And the Prime Minister's response to this was that the evidence would have to be very compelling indeed to justify taking any action against Iraq.
That call, he said, reflected a sea change for the Americans, a new determination amongst the hawks who were out to get the Iraqi leader. But he insisted his own boss wanted Saddam Hussein pursued via the UN route.
最初に準備してたプロットっていうのがですね、イラン・イラクの核査察の話なんですけども、どうやらそこに核兵器がある、メタルギアがあるらしいということで、査察に行こうとするんですけど、どうも見せてくれないので、そこで緊張状態があって、対メタルギア兵器というのを積んだ空母艦隊が、何十時間以内に査察をさせてくれないととんでもないことになるという状況で、その艦隊がリキッド軍に乗っ取られるという、そのような話だったと思います。ただ半年ぐらいしてですかね、実際にそういう状況が起こってしまいまして、これはちょっと作れないなということで、プロットを改定して、そのできたのが2なんですけども、2のタンカー編というのはそのちょっと名残になります。
If the big shell explodes, massive quantities of chlorinated chemicals used in killing marine bacteria will go up in flames along with the crude oil. If that happens, expect a large amount of harmful chemical substances, including dioxins, to be released into the atmosphere. Dioxins are common nomenclature for polychlorinated dibenzodioxin and polychlorinated dibenzofuran. They are organic chloride compounds that are highly acute and toxic, and are powerful chemicals that can cause cancer, genetic disorders, and birth defects. On top of that, they do not decompose easily, nor dissolve in water, making it easy for them to accumulate within the bodies of living organisms. The environmental impact on the bay and coastal area ecosystem would be unfathomable. Environmental restoration would likely require several generations.
Bin Laden is a privatization advocate, using fronts like MAK, also known as Al-Qifa, or the Struggle. Bin Laden creates a network for private donors to support the Mujahideen through. Bin Laden draws on his background in business to make war a new kind of business. This establishes the foundations for what will become the age of privately funded terror. When the US-led Desert Storm War went on from 1990 to 91, it brought American troops, including women, onto military bases in Saudi Arabia for the first time. Bin Laden, who the Saudis had passed up and gone with the US-led coalition when time had come to punish Arab National Socialist Saddam Hussein for the annexation of Kuwait, would tell countless reporters that this intrusion on sacred lands was really the last straw. Soon enough, he would be declaring open war against the United States.
King, Fat Man is dead.
It doesn't matter. I have the intruder to take care of.
Yes, King.
New York, here in the city where dreams come true and desires rule, something is being bought, sold, and thrown away, even as we speak. But behind the scenes of business as usual, the nefarious JE Corporation lines its already bloated coffers with profits from worthless products. As JE swindles yet another innocent into purchasing high-priced junk, the FBI mobilizes a top-secret task force to put a stop to the menace. Now, the city's best-kept secret spy is out there, briefed and ready to protect the people from JE, the catalog of conspiracy. Just call him 2.5.
star this morning to anyone who goes to see a controversial new movie. Thursday's New York premiere of The Interview was reportedly canceled. Hackers who attacked Sony Pictures warned the world will be, quote, full of fear if the movie hits theaters as scheduled on Christmas Day. They tell Americans to remember the 11th of September.
The Interview is a comedy where the CIA recruits two journalists to assassinate North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. North Korea is outraged by the movie but denies any connection to the threat.
But the Navy didn't just stop at putting an end to Red Cell. Admiral Irish Flynn, who was the head of the Naval Investigative Service at the time, sought prosecution on Richard Marcinko for Red Cell's conduct in the events that occurred. This led to the Navy launching a criminal investigation against Marcinko, where it would take them 5 years and roughly $60 million to attempt to pin him on stealing. In Marcinko's words, the Navy spent 5 years and $60 million trying to prove I stole $118,000. They failed. After military prosecutors refused to take the case, in an unusual move, the Navy had the feds over in the Justice Department take the case. All in all, he was indicted for conspiracy, conflict of interest, and lying to the government, which all related to a $118,000 kickback scheme regarding how he procured his equipment for Red Cell. However, on January 24, 1990, Richard Marcinko would only be convicted of conspiracy to defraud the government and was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison. With the founder of Red Cell in prison, what about the fate of Red Cell itself? After serving his prison sentence, Richard Marcinko would carry on with his life just fine. Red Cell, on the other hand, not so much. After years of nickel and diming, the unit had been cut back to bare bones. With only 8 men, weak leadership, and hardly any money, the unit was reduced to performing tabletop war games instead of live exercises, and morale continually declined. What was once the elite counterterrorism exercise force was now a shadow of its former self. Eventually, in October 1992, Red Cell was disbanded. But the idea and thought of a team like Marcinko's Red Cell did not die. After the 9/11 attacks, the Central Intelligence Agency forged a new Red Cell team, with an initial goal to get fresh sets of eyes to reconsider the range of terror threats. This new team possessed many of the same fundamentals of its predecessor. Just like the first Red Cell, the CIA Red Cell was formed to brainstorm ways to attack America to facilitate the creation of additional security measures to prevent those attacks. They even hired novelist and nonfiction writer Brad Meltzer to write plots as part of this program.
It seems that you've been living 2 lives. In one life, you're Thomas A. Anderson. The other life is lived in computers, where you go by the hacker alias Neo and are guilty of virtually every computer crime we have a law for.
Hillary Clinton, the 42nd president. Oh, she'd be the 43rd president. All right, but who's the 21st?
What do you mean, handle?
They're shutting down the police band. All calls will be coming through this switchboard.
And I'm gonna marry Donald Trump.
What are you... What the...
You're a man?
But what about the Pentagon?
Pentagon?
Not yet. It's not over yet.